Hey guys, Rebecca Diaz-Avedo here, going live inside the art of building a successful massage practice. I'm teaching a workshop this weekend, and one of the things that always is so surprising for people is understanding the power of tone in communication. Now, you guys have heard me say a lot that 90% of your success is likely attributed to how you communicate with people, not your massage skills, which is kind of crazy to say because everybody seems to think that massage skills are required to build a successful business. But just ask yourself, how many massage therapists out there have you ever known that maybe aren't that great at what they do, but they're great at marketing, they're great at communication, right? That was one of the insights I had early in my career where that caused me to start thinking differently about things. That being said, I'm not saying be a crappy massage therapist by any means. You've got to, if you want to market a business, you've got to be confident in your skills. But today I want to talk about tone and tone of voice. There's a couple of statistics I'm going to throw at you. Don't ask me to cite them, but we talk about this a lot in the realm of communication, that only 7% of communication is the words you use. In other words, 93% of how a communication gets delivered is not verbal. It's nonverbal. So 93% of it is basically body language and tone of voice and other nonverbal factors. This is so important because how many of you communicate regularly with people through text message or written mediums, and you know it can be misunderstood and it can be misconstrued? Okay, so when you're sending something in writing, a personal communication, a sensitive communication, you just gave away 93% of the power behind what you intended to communicate, because the other person is left by looking at the words to decide what the tone of voice is and what you actually meant by it. It's really important. Is this making sense, you guys? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One of the posts recently, in our group here was about when clients ask, can you do it cheaper? Okay, maybe a client's asking for a discount. Maybe a client is just saying this is expensive, I can't afford it, something along those lines. I'm going to use this post as an example because it really is about delivering difficult messages or having awkward conversations with people, and I want to empower you in this. Okay, so let's just use the example of a client saying, can you do it cheaper? Pay attention to tone here. If a client says, hey, can you do this cheaper? Can you hear there's a softening, a curiosity behind that? It's a plea. The tone conveys something versus, can you do this cheaper? Right? Do you hear the difference? Can you guys hear the difference? Let me just say it again. Can you do this cheaper? Versus, can you do this cheaper? Do you see my facial expressions? Not so much on body language because I'm sitting in my comfy chair. Not so much body language, but facial expression and tone of voice conveys what's behind the question. And human beings' brains are pattern matching and pattern recognizing devices. And so we tend to intuitively understand what is meant behind the words. I'd love to know any comments or questions or insights you have as you're watching or as you're participating here. And if you're watching the replay, of course, #replay so that I know you're here. Yeah, super, super important. Okay, so we intuitively understand the meaning behind the words. This is another takeaway from this, is that if somebody texts you a message or posts something on Facebook, that is only the written word. That is only 7% of the message that is intended to be conveyed. So if you decided that that person was being shaming, who added that tone? You did. You added that. And that may not have been at all what was behind their words. Behind their words could have been softness. It could have been a curiosity. It could have been just a genuine question. So it's really important that we are engaging in actual verbal and face-to-face communication with our clients, especially when it comes to sensitive things and difficult messages. I'm going to use this other post as a reference. You can see it reflected in my glasses as I'm looking at my iPad. Okay, so first of all, I just can't ever imagine that a client would even say, can you do it cheaper? Like I think that clients would say things in other ways, like, are there any discounts available for your sessions? And can you see there's a meaning behind those words? The words are simply, are there any discounts available for these sessions? Do you have any discounts for me? That's an innocent question. That's great. But you can see if a person says, do you have any discounts available for these sessions? They're already dissatisfied. Can you see it on my face? Can you hear it in the tone? That would be a whole different kind of conversation. That would be a whole different set of responses that I would recommend you deploy if somebody's talking to you like that. Versus somebody say, hey, are there any discounts available? Like, are you willing to discount your sessions at all? Can you see that person is being brave? Probably. That person might be what? Courageous. That person might be genuinely interested in finding a way to make this work for less, but we still have no idea what's behind the question. Guys, this is why communication is so important and why I love teaching and coaching people on this. It can make or break you. It can make all the difference in the world. All right, so big takeaway so far, to recap, is just remember that 7% of communication is the words we use. So if we're just relying on the words, you're making all the rest of it up. Second piece is, if you're only using the words, you relinquish 93% of the control of the message that you intended to deliver. Okay, so if a client, for example, I'm just going to keep using this post. If a client says, hey, are there any discounts? Like, this is a lot of money and I really love your work and I'm just trying to save money. I really want to be able to come, like you have some context for what they're saying. I really want to be able to come, but I'm just wondering if you can do it for any less. Okay, something like that. Here are my possible responses. Okay, so I listed about 10 things there maybe, but let me show you how tone can make a difference. Are you asking me to deliver less? Okay, let me try that again. Are you asking me to deliver less? Are you asking me to deliver less? Okay, and now I'm being a little dramatic, but I want to make the point that how you deliver the message is far more important than what you're saying. How you say it is far more important than what you say. Write that down. How I say this is far more important than what I say. All right, so are you asking me to deliver less? And the person might go, no, and say you have a point from which you can dialogue. All right, let me give you my second example when the client asks if you can do it cheaper. This was my second response. I'm sure someone else can. There is no shortage of mediocre massage therapists around here. Those were the words I wrote. But let's play around with tone. I'm sure someone else can. You know, there's no shortage of mediocre massage therapists around here. Right? And you're kind of making a joke about it in terms of, why would you want to pay less for a massage? Right? Like, that's one way of even potentially standing for the value of what you do and telling the client, you're freaking crazy to want to go anywhere and pay less, right? Of course, all of this and every communication you deliver with the client has everything to do with the level of rapport that you have with the client. All right? And your tone is going to match that. Your tone has to be appropriate to that. Okay, if one of my best friends I hadn't talked to in 2 weeks had been texting me and I hadn't replied, if they texted me and said, dude, do you hate me? I'd be like, no, dude, I love you. I'm just really busy right now. I wouldn't take it as some scathing assault, right? It's just like, oh no, I don't hate you. So tone is so important. Let me give you another example here. Is cheap your only criteria for body work? All right, if somebody says, can you do this cheaper? And you say, is cheap your only criteria for body work? It's an innocent question. Don't you want to find out what's behind that question? Why are they asking, is cheap? It's an innocent question. You're not saying, is cheap your only criteria for body work? Like, this is not a jousting match here. But you can see how unwittingly, if you're not paying attention to your tone, that it could be very off-putting for people. There is no shortage of mediocre massage therapists. It would be a joke. It would be with somebody you have rapport with. It would be in the appropriate tone. Can you see it would be different? Let's say the background is this person's like, man, I totally love you, but this is breaking my bank. I'd be like, dude, it's okay. There's no shortage of mediocre massage therapists out there. I'm sure you could find somebody for cheaper. Right? Like, you see how delivering that message, all communication is context specific. All communication depends on the context in which it's being delivered. So yeah, I'm definitely not saying go out there and slam your fellow massage therapists. It's just that sometimes people struggle for words in the moment. And that's what I like to do, is help people figure out how to say things. But of course, it's up to you to figure out what would be most appropriate and what works for you and make it your own. Does that make sense? Fair question. Okay, then here's another response example. Somebody says, can you do this cheaper? I'd say, cheaper than what? Versus cheaper than what? Cheaper than what? Cheaper than what? Like, do you see tone? All right. Tone is so important. This is a business, not a hobby. Okay. Guys, also, these are things that I need you to get clear in your own head. I'm not necessarily saying you should say this to other people at all. These are some possible responses in your head that you need to think about before you speak. Because you are in business to be a business. You're not volunteering. This is not a hobby. If you are, this is not the group for you. I coach massage therapists how to be successful in business, and that's very clearly stated in the rules, okay? So that's what this group is about. So here's another way of looking at this, okay? Client says, can you do this cheaper? And you say, no, I'm sorry. Because I'd really like to stay in business. And if I charge less, it's actually costing me money. Sorry. It's actually costing me money to offer my services. And as much as I love volunteering and as much as I love helping people, I do this as a business, not a hobby. And can you see that that can be a very loving, gentle, kind explanation for people? Like, it doesn't have to be some slam or some argument in your face. Okay, so that is, guys, that is just so important. Think about that. Also, I'm loving the comments underneath that post where you guys were commenting. And even one that's like, you know what, perhaps you should ask your employer for a raise. Do you see how that can also be a statement of advocacy? I'm not saying being snarky. I'm not saying being a you know what. Just know what to say. Think it through. All communication is context specific. And consider the tone in which you are delivering the message and the level of rapport and relationship that you have with that person. Tone is so important, guys. It's so important. So take that little golden nugget into your day and go spread some sunshine. You guys are awesome. And we'll talk to you later.